There are 15 forgotten superfoods that medieval farmers swore by, and every single one of them is still growing today, quite possibly within a short walk of your own front door. I am going to tell you something that the big grocery shops would rather you never found out. The old ways knew better, and the food that kept whole villages alive through the darkest winters is still out there in the hedges, waiting for you to remember it. And I have saved the most astonishing for last, a flower so beautiful it could stop your heart, in both senses of the word. My name is Malcolm Ashby, and for 50 years now I have been growing things and gathering things, and in all that time I have learnt that the past was not so foolish as we like to think. Let me say one thing, and then I will not bring it up again. Every plant, I know its look-alike and what it is worth in dollars, I have put into one book. On page 31, there is a weed that grows in most backyards that people spray on sight and that replaces the $5 tea they have been buying for years. It is at thebackyardgoldmine.com, and the link is under this video. If you want it, it is there. That is all. Right then, let us get into it. Number 1. Stinging nettle. Now I know the very word makes you flinch, for we have all been caught by it as children. But the medieval cook knew a secret you have forgotten. In the lean weeks of early spring, when the winter stores were gone and nothing else had greened, the nettle came up first and strong, and it carried more iron than spinach ever dreamed of, along with a good dose of vitamin C. They gathered the young tops with a leather glove, and the moment you cook them or dry them, that sting vanishes clean away, leaving a green as rich as any you can buy. The old country folk even had a practice called urtication, where they would press the fresh nettle against aching joints on purpose, for the sting brought the blood up and eased the deep pain of rheumatism. Spinners took its long stalks and drew a strong linen-like thread from them, so it clothed a body as well as fed one. A soup, a tea, a broth, that was how they took it, and it set them right after the hungry months. Number 2. Broadleaf plantain. Not the banana, mind, but the humble flat-leaved weed you have trodden on 10,000 times without a glance, growing in every path and driveway crack in the land. The old herbals called it the mother of herbs, and the Saxons counted it among their 9 sacred plants, naming it in a charm that was old before the Normans ever came. Crush a leaf and lay it on a cut or a sting, and it works, for it holds a substance called allantoin that helps the skin knit itself back together, drawing out the poison and closing the wound. The reapers of the harvest fields kept a leaf tucked away for the blisters and the nettle stings of a long day's work. And the seeds, those little brown spikes it sends up, are the very same thing as the psyllium husk they sell you in the chemist for your digestion at a fine price. A poultice for the skin, the seeds for the gut, and free for the taking. Nothing wasted. Number 3. Chickweed. A soft, low, sprawling little green with a single curious line of hairs down its stem, and to the medieval poor it was salvation itself. There is a stretch of the year the old ones called the hunger gap, when winter food is spent and summer food is not yet grown, and chickweed came thick and mild right through it, full of vitamin C when the body was crying out for it. They ate it raw in the hand, they simmered it soft in the pot, and they bruised it into a cooling green poultice for hot, angry skin, for swellings, and for the itch of a rash. The good wife would keep hens on it too, which is how the little plant earned its very name. Gentle enough for a sick child or an old grandmother, and it grows still in every damp and shaded corner of every garden, asking nothing of you but to be noticed and gathered. Number 4. Good King Henry. Now there is a name to conjure with, and a plant the medieval gardener prized so highly he gave it a king's own title to set it apart from a poorer weed they called Bad Henry. They called it the poor man's asparagus, for in spring it sends up slender tender shoots you cut and steam just like the finest spears off a rich man's table. But here is the cleverness of it, and why every cottage grew a patch by the door. You take 3 harvests from the one plant. First the young shoots in spring, then through summer the broad arrow-shaped leaves cooked down like spinach, and at the last the seeds, which they ground for a coarse dark meal in a hungry year. One plant, standing faithfully in the same corner for a lifetime, feeding you 3 different ways through 3 different seasons. That is the sort of quiet, thrifty wisdom we have gone and thrown away. Number 5. Einkorn wheat. This is the grandmother of all our wheat, the very first grain that mankind ever tamed, grown on the dry hillsides of the old world long before the great cathedrals ever rose. Where our modern wheat is a bloated, much tampered thing, einkorn stays as it always was, with just 14 chromosomes to our modern wheat's 42, a simpler and a purer grain by far. It carries more protein and more of the good minerals, and a great many people who cannot abide modern bread find they can eat einkorn and feel no trouble at all in the belly, for the body seems to know it of old and digest it kindly. The medieval miller ground it slow between 2 great stones, and the baker made of it a dense, golden, nourishing loaf that fueled a hard day swinging a scythe. It is coming back to us now, and if ever you find it, pay the little extra and treat it with respect. Number 6. Angelica. The monks loved this one above almost all others, and they called it the root of the Holy Ghost and the angel plant besides. For the old legend held that an angel revealed it in a dream as a guard against the plague. A tall, handsome plant with hollow stems and great domed heads of green-white flowers, it was carried in the pocket and chewed in the plague years in the desperate hope it would keep the sickness at bay. Whether it ever turned the pestilence, I could not honestly say, but it is a genuine and a fine tonic for the digestion, warming and settling to a sour and troubled stomach and a griping wind. They candied the young stems into a sweet for the children. They brewed the bitter root for the stomach, and to this very day you will taste Angelica in a good glass of gin, that piney, green, faintly sweet note being the angel's own lingering signature. Number 7. Flax. A slender, swaying plant topped with a flower of the softest sky blue, and it clothed the whole of the medieval world and fed it besides. From its tough stems came linen, the very cloth on their backs and their beds and their altars, and from its seed came the golden flax you know today. That little seed is one of the richest sources on this whole earth of the plant form of omega-3, the good oil that quietly tends the heart and eases the stiff joints. So valued was it that the Emperor Charlemagne himself passed a law commanding his people to grow it and to eat it for the good of their health, a mighty king troubling to legislate for the well-being of the humblest of his subjects. They ground the seed into their bread and stirred it through their morning porridge and pressed the rest for oil. You could do the very same thing tomorrow morning and be the better for it. Number 8. Lemon balm. Brush this soft, crinkled green leaf between your fingers and you are met with the sweetest breath of lemon, and the medieval heart lifted at it just as yours will now. They called it heart's delight and the gladdening herb, and both Charlemagne and the great abbess Hildegard of Bingen ordered it grown in their gardens to lift the spirit and drive off the black dog of melancholy. And it was no mere fancy of theirs, for lemon balm truly does calm a racing, anxious, fretful mind and settle a body gently towards sleep, and modern study has since found it holds a real power against certain viruses, the cold sore chief among them. The beekeepers rubbed it inside an empty hive to coax a new swarm to stay. A simple tea of the fresh leaves in hot water, taken of a quiet evening, and the cares of the whole long day loosen their grip. Let me pause here just a moment, because I promised you something at the very start, and I am a man who keeps his word. That flower I spoke of, the one so beautiful it could stop your heart in both senses at once, it is coming, it is the very last of our 15, and it is the most extraordinary thing in this whole green catalogue. So do stay with me. Now, on we go. Number 9, horseradish. A fierce and an honest root, this one, and the medieval household kept a store of it against the deep and joyless cold of winter. When a chest grew heavy and congested and the breath came thick and rattling, they would grate the raw root, and grate it they must, for here is the little secret of it. The root does next to nothing until it is bruised and crushed, and only then does the sharp, eye-watering fire wake and rise within it. That very fire laid as a poultice upon the chest, or simply breathed in deep over the fresh grating, opened the airways and broke the old congestion loose. It cleared a fogged head like nothing else in the whole garden, and they took it grated with a little vinegar alongside their winter beef besides. A very little goes a long, long way, and it roots so stubbornly that once you have it in your ground, you have it for the rest of your life. Number 10, the ground bean, which the old folk also called hopness. Now here is a true treasure, all but wholly forgotten, a climbing vine that hides away beneath the soil a knotted string of small brown tubers, and those humble tubers carry near 3 times the protein of a common potato. Just think on that a moment, a plant that hands you both the filling starch and the good protein together out from under your very feet. And being of the bean family, it does the tired soil a great kindness too, drawing nitrogen down out of the very air and feeding it back into the ground it stands in, so it enriches your patch even as it fills your plate. The old ones boiled or roasted the tubers slow over the embers much as we would a potato, and dried the surplus for the winter, a food that asks so little and gives back so much, and we have simply let it slip clean out of our minds. Number 11, comfrey. The old bone setters and the wise women swore by this broad, bristly-leaved plant, and they gave it a name that tells you everything you need to know, knit bone. When a limb was broken or a deep wound would not close, they would make a green poultice of the crushed leaf and the slimy root and bind it fast about the injury, and it truly does speed the healing of torn skin and the mending of broken bone, being rich in that same allantoin that spurs the flesh to grow anew. Now here I must give you one plain caution, and only the one. This is a plant for the outside of the body and never for the eating, for taken inside it can harm the liver over time, so keep it strictly to the poultice and the compress where its old magic is safe and sound. Bound to the outside of a hurt though, few plants in all the world have served poor folk so long and so faithfully. Number 12, borage. A rough, sprawling, hairy plant crowned with flowers of the most perfect 5-pointed star shape and a heavenly, unforgettable blue, and the medieval knight would take a draught of it before ever he rode out to battle. There was an old rhyme, worn smooth with the repeating of it down the years, that ran, "I, borage, bring courage." They firmly believed it lifted the heavy and the fearful heart and put boldness back into a frightened man, and they floated the bright flowers in wine and cup to gladden a wedding or a gathering. And there is a real truth beneath the pretty poetry, for borage was long and rightly taken to raise the low spirits and steady the shaking nerves in a trying and a sorrowful time. The young leaves taste of cool, fresh cucumber and went straight into their salads and summer drinks, and the blue stars they candied for a sweet or scattered fresh across a dish. Number 13, sorrel. Pluck a single leaf of this and lay it on your tongue, and you will taste a bright, clean, startling sharpness, almost as though a lemon had somehow come up growing green in an English field. That keen sourness is the good vitamin C within it, and to the medieval world, long before ever a sailor spoke the dreaded word, sorrel was a quiet shield against the scurvy that stalked them through every green-starved and joyless winter. A leaf or two would freshen a tired and sluggish body and brighten dull grey food besides. They pounded it with a little liquid into a sharp green sauce for their river fish and their meat, cutting clean through the richness the way a good squeeze of lemon does for us, and they dropped handfuls into their thin spring soups. It grows wild in the damp meadows still, and it grows tame in the garden very gladly, sharp and cheerful year upon year upon year. Number 14, mugwort. The wayfarer's own herb, this tall, silvery, grey-green plant that lines the old roads and the ditches, and the footsore traveller of the Middle Ages would tuck a sprig of it into his shoe, believing firmly it kept his feet from tiring on the long and dusty miles. They named it too the mother of herbs in the ancient Saxon charm, and hung great bunches of it over the door and the byre against ill fortune and lightning. It was the dreamer's plant besides, taken in a tea or laid beneath the pillow to bring long and vivid dreams to the sleeping mind. And beyond all the folklore, it is a genuine and a useful bitter tonic, and a small cup of it stirs a sluggish digestion back to life and wakens a poor appetite before a heavy meal. They brewed it thin and drank it down just before eating, and hung the great grey bunches to dry slow in the smoky rafters. Number 15, and here it is at last, the one I promised you at the very start, lily of the valley. You know its flowers well. Those little white bells hung, nodding along a slender green stem, sweeter in their scent than almost anything else that grows in this world, beloved in a bride's bouquet to this very day. And here is the great paradox that makes it the most remarkable plant in the whole of the medieval physic garden. It is at one and the same time a deadly poison and a healing medicine, and the one hard truth does not for a moment cancel the other. Now hear my single caution plainly, for I would never in my life lead you wrong. This plant is genuinely and seriously poisonous. It must never, ever be eaten in any amount, and I share it with you here as history and as wonder alone, never as any remedy for the home. For within those pretty white bells there lie substances called cardiac glycosides, and in a large dose they will stop a beating heart stone dead in the chest. And yet in a careful, measured, tiny dose, those very same substances will steady and strengthen a weak and failing heart. The medieval monks knew this, though they had no proper word for any of it, and they measured out their most careful and fearful drops for what they called the dropsy, that dreadful swelling of the body we now understand plainly as heart failure. And here is the true marvel of the thing. Those glycosides are the near cousins of the very heart drugs your own good doctor might prescribe you today. Those quiet, patient monks, bent over their walled garden beds, were pioneering the science of the human heart a full 600 years before ever we gave it a name. A flower that could stop your heart or save it by the trembling difference of a single measured dose. And there you have them, all 15, plants that fed and healed whole villages and then slipped clean out of the memory of the world. But think on this one thing before you go. Not a single one of them ever needed us in order to survive. Through all the long centuries since, while we forgot their names and their gifts entirely, they carried quietly on without us, seeding themselves in the hedges and rooting deep in the cracks of the old walls, still here, still waiting, patient as only green and growing things can be. The knowledge left us, but the plants themselves never did. So I would dearly love to hear from you down in the comments below, and tell me just 2 things if you would. First, which of all these 15 surprised you the most? And second, which of them do you reckon is growing near you right now? For I would wager more than one is a good deal closer than you think. Thank you kindly for spending this while with me. Truly I mean it, for there is no finer company in all the world than folk who still care for the old wisdom. And if you would like every one of these plants set out plain, its lookalikes and what each is honestly worth, it is all there in my book over at thebackyardgoldmine.com, the link below, and I will say no more about it. Now next time, I want to tell you about a single tree that flavored all of America for 300 years, the root beer, the chewing gum, the toothpaste, the gumbo, until almost overnight in 1960, it was banned from every shelf in the land, and the reason will astonish you. Until then, mind how you go and keep your eyes on the green.